when they factored in housing costs, they had like a 20% increase for housing costs. When we know in the market that the housing costs have either flattened or sometimes even many cases have gone down. So that's because they're looking at 6 month old data. So if you take that into consideration that they're looking at 6 month old data and whatever they're doing is taking 6 months to take effect, then that's a year lag right there.
Welcome to the Bar Down Investing Show. Here are your hosts, Kyle Wilson and Jay Scott.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Bar Down Investing Show. I am your host, Kyle Wilson, known by all my friends as Ashley's husband, and I'm here once again with the man himself, Mr. Jay Scott. How's it going, Jay?
I am maybe not the man, but I'm definitely a man, at least as far as everybody knows. So I'll take that.
Him, her.
Him, her, him, he, me, Jay. Jay is my pronoun. I'm doing well. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yeah, I guess when's this coming out? It's going to be in the new year, probably, right?
This will be in the new year. This will be Tuesday, the 3rd-ish, I think.
Yeah, happy 2023. And in that spirit, we were preparing for the Level 10 podcast, and we noticed that every single headline that was popping up was everyone just making their predictions for 2023. I didn't really want to make predictions, but Jay was pretty intent on us doing it. So this is going to be a predictions podcast. I have no idea how long it's going to take because Jay likes to ramble on quite a bit. So we might have to put this into 2 episodes. So bear with us as we go through this.
So you know that, and I know that, but we don't have to tell other people my secrets.
Yeah, so I mean, the big thing on everyone's mind is there going to be a recession in 2023? I think there's pretty much a consensus, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Oh, we're starting off with the big ticket items. Yeah, I don't think we avoid a recession in 2023. So I think it's inevitable. It's either going to happen on its own, or I think the Fed's going to force it. I expect that it will probably happen Q2, Q3 of 2023. I think we'll see a spike in unemployment, maybe a drop in GDP again. But I'd say summer 2023 is when we see it. That's my prediction. I think it's going to be a pretty standard-ish recession. I think we'll see some increase in unemployment. I'm going to guess. We'll talk about numbers later. Let's just stick with generalities here. I think it'll be kind of a standard recession. I think it'll last maybe 6 to 12 months. I think the Fed will start reacting towards the middle to the end of 2023, and I think by the end of 2023, we will be in a recession. So there's my prediction. How about you?
I mean, it's pretty much the consensus. There's going to be a recession. I think the only discussion now is when, how deep, and for how long. So I'm going to Jay and I really agree on most things. So I'm going to try to play the other side on a lot of this stuff, even if I don't believe in it. And I guess the only argument against there being a recession is everyone thinks there's going to be. Typically, when you have something that everyone agrees on when it comes to the economy, then they're usually wrong. So everyone kind of agrees that there's going to be a recession, that we've already hiked past the point of a soft landing. But I can't point to any reason why there won't be. It's just one of those things where I think it's next to impossible for them to be able to hit it right on the head of, okay, now we have to stop with the rate hikes and start with the easing. So I completely agree. I think it's going to be this year that we're hitting a recession, probably in the back half of the year. To your point, though, we should talk some numbers to back some of that stuff up. So why don't we start with the Fed funds rate? Where do we think we're going to be with the Fed funds rate next year?
I think we're going to see 2 more hikes. Let's call them 25 basis point hikes. I know that's not a real aggressive prediction there. That's pretty much what everybody's predicting. But I'm going to say in Q1 we're going to see another couple small hikes that'll get us into the 5 or just over 5% territory. And I think by the end of the year, I think we're still going to be around five. Maybe we'll go up a little bit above five. Maybe the cuts will start towards the end of the year, but I don't see us much off of five anytime next year. So I'm going to guess somewhere. I'm going to guess 5.25 for the federal funds rate at the end of 2023.
Yeah, so if you look at the, so we depend a lot on the forward-looking SOFR curve for our predictions for commercial real estate. And so if you look at the forward SOFR curve, they have us peaking kind of in the summer and then starting to drop down a little bit in the back half of the year. If you start to look at October, November, then they have the rates start to coming down. So they're, the forward curve would predict that we're going to have, to your point, another couple of rate hikes, maybe ending around 5.25, holding for a little while, and then starting to drop off at the end of the year. It's, to me, one of the main reasons I did want to do predictions is there's so many other factors. There's so many other things that could affect this. We're still dealing with COVID in China and supply chain issues. We're still dealing with all these other things with the global economy if we're not just looking nationally. So who knows? And I think that it's we've become to this point in the economic monetary policy where we can't handle a recession. Recessions used to be like a usual normal thing that just happened all the time. And it was part of the market cycle and it was okay for that to happen. And now we've kind of gone into this new era where recessions are bad. And the Fed doesn't want a recession to happen. They're trying to prevent recessions. They don't think that a recession is a normal thing for the economy. And so at the first sign of some trouble, they're going to start cutting rates. So when is that going to happen is the question. Is that going to happen beginning of the year? Is it going to happen in the summer? So I do believe they start cutting rates, and I think they're going to cut a little bit faster than what you're saying and what the market's saying. I think once they start cutting, it'll be for a reason. Something broke, something happened, and they're going to start cutting every single meeting they have. They'll be cutting, and I think the Fed fund rate, is closer to sub four, to be honest, by the end of next year.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty bold. Okay, I want to hear a number. Give me a number. What's sub four?
Sub four? Well, all right, 375. There you go.
375. There you go. Yeah.
Are you record? Is that because you're recording this and you want to say at the end of the year how far off you are? What was your number?
What was my number? I think I said 5.25. So
Okay.
I'm putting this down, and we have it. I believe that this podcast will still be around come the end of next year. So there's no denying it at this point. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the nature of it is though that just if we just make bold predictions, then you just take the sound bites of the ones that were right and you just forget about the ones that were wrong, right?
Dude, have a little bit of fun in your life. Crotchety Canadian.
I am in Canada right now.
Yeah, I see why your wife calls you the crotchety Canadian. Now, I definitely agree with you that that the Fed. A lot of people like to say that the Fed's become political, and they're kind of kowtowing to political wins and whoever's in the White House. I certainly think they've become more political than they should be, more than they have been prior to 2008. But for me, I think a lot of it goes to the fact that there's so much information out there. There's the internet out there. Everybody kind of has their opinion, and it's got to be difficult to be part of the Fed and not read what's going on and read what people think and feel a lot different types of pressure than they felt 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they could lead us into a recession, and nobody was ever really talking about the Fed except the Wall Street Journal and a couple other select magazines that were geared towards like the economists and people that like to follow that stuff. These days, you can go on Facebook, you can go on LinkedIn, you can go on Twitter, and everybody's an expert. And so there's so many more opinions out there, and everybody's talking about it. So if you're part of the Fed, you got to be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that like you're getting criticized left and right, and people don't want a recession, and so yeah, it's a tough job, but I agree with you. I think that that they'll probably cut a little bit sooner than a lot of people think they should. But I still think we're going to be in towards the end of 2023 or beginning of 2024 at least before we start seeing any significant cuts.
Well, the question is something going to break, right? Like I think everyone had the consensus that the Fed's just going to keep hiking till something breaks, whether it's, the UK with their pension funds breaking or the commercial debt in our US economy. And what if something does break, what is it and how severe is it? Because if they're going to start cutting at the first sign of something breaking, then if it's not a huge break, then we might be okay. They might engineer a relatively soft landing, but if it's something huge that breaks, then we might be in trouble. So, curtailing that into the Fed hiking rates, they do it based off inflation. Where do you think that the inflation will end up in 2023?
So, I mean, historically, high inflation takes years to resolve. But also historically, we haven't been aggressive as aggressive as we've been over the last 6 to 8 months. So I think that between the fact that we've hiked rates, the fact that we're likely heading into a recession, the fact that supply chains are starting to ease up, I think we're going to see a good year for inflation. I'm not saying that it won't peak again at some point, maybe not, certainly not peak where it was this year. But I wouldn't be surprised to see it go up a little bit, either 2023 or 2024. But if you're looking at the 12-month average, if we look at by next December at this time, the 12-month average, I'm going to guess we're somewhere between 2.5% and 3.5%. So let's say 3%. That would put us at kind of a monthly average of 0.2 or 0.3%, which I think is reasonable. I mean, if you look over the past 6 months, we've had a couple months of 0.1 increases. We've had a couple months of 0.3 increases. We've had a couple months of 0.4 increases. So if we keep that trend going, which I think we will, we'll be somewhere between 0.2, 0.3 every month. And that takes us to a 12-month average of about 3%, 2.5 to 3.5% a year from now. So I think we're going to get pretty close to that target that the Fed is targeting.
Yeah, most experts that I've listened to have it a little higher than you. They have it in the 4 or 5% range. They have it coming down, but they also have it being a persisting problem. Um, I'm going to go contrarian on this one. I think that the Fed, when they're making their decisions, they're doing it based off of outdated data. And I also think that the effects of those decisions take a while to percolate through the actual economy. I find it really funny that when Powell started doing these rate hikes, his only message that he was saying was, "Oh, what we're doing now is going to take 6, 9, maybe even 12 months for us to see the effects of it." And yet, 8 months later, he's acting like every single thing that he does is having this immediate effect. So if you go back to what Powell was saying at the first rate hike, that these things take 6 to 9 months to work their way through the economy, and you also take the fact that like our last inflation print, it had rents and the overall housing costs of where however they calculate when you own what your rent would be technically. When they factored in housing costs, they had like a 20% increase for housing costs. When we know in the market that the housing costs have either flattened or sometimes even many cases have gone down. So that's because they're looking at 6-month-old data. So if you take that into consideration, that they're looking at 6-month-old data and whatever they're doing is taking 6 months to take effect, then that's a year lag right there. So I think we're just starting to see the effects of the beginning rate hikes. And that's why we're seeing inflation come down now. And that all of a sudden, everything's going to kind of happen at once. And we're going to see inflation drop like a rock. Now, that's pending. We still have this big issue in China. Who knows what's going on with China with their second wave of COVID. And or I don't know if you call it second wave when they had a zero COVID policy. But they've ended the zero COVID policy, and who knows how that's going to affect supply chains. So that's a big if everything goes well with all that. But pending no other outside factors, I think it's possible we even might see inflation go to zero. We might see disinflation. We might and they'll obviously correct that. But I predict that at some point it's just going to fall off a cliff. And I know that's bold, but as I said, I could just not take this clip later.
Well, it's funny because if you were to ask me like my second guess, would my secondary prediction be, am I off? Or if you were to ask me what direction do I think I'm most likely to be off, I 100% agree with you. I think deflation is a possibility. I think the Fed is a lot more scared of deflation than inflation, and we won't go into exactly why that is here, but long story short, that deflation can turn into a spiral that can get out of control and take down an economy for decades. So I think the Fed's going to be very cognizant of deflation and making sure if it starts to happen that they fix it. And that could be what leads to quick rate cuts. But certainly if I'm off in one direction, I think it's probably I'm probably on the high side, and I agree with you that we could easily see 1 to 2% inflation, maybe even less than that for a couple months. I mean, if you look back between 2012 and 2020, average inflation was well below 2%, and that was actually part of the issue that the Fed had, was that inflation was too low for those many years, and that was part of the reason why we didn't get to the kind of the next recession in the timing that we normally do. We're normally 4-6 years between recessions. We went 13 years between 2008 and 2020 or 2021, and probably because inflation was so low during that period. So could we go back to where we were for that decade? Certainly. So yeah, I think everybody else is saying inflation is going to be high for a while, but I agree with you. I think it's going to be lower than what most people expect. And I'm going to go with 3%. What's your number? Give me a number for the 12-month trailing starting last month.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I don't. It's easy for me to throw up bold predictions until you tell me to put an actual number on it. Yeah, I'm going to say I'll go right on the Fed target, 2.5. And I know that sounds like me saying that they won, but I think it's going to be a rocky road to get there.
That was a lot of talk to end up at 2.5.
I was, because that's what I think it's going to break before that. So if you want to talk about by the end of the year, it's they're gonna get down to they'll have a month of deflation print, and they'll go, oh geez, and then they'll start making some changes, and we'll have. So are we talking average for the year? Or are we talking where's it going to be at the end of the year?
Well, what's going to be the 12-month average? What's going to be the annual?
So if we do 12-month average, what are we at now? We just put 7.1,
7.3, something like that.
Yeah. So to get down to even your 3, like that's if we think about stepping down. So even if we go 7, 6, 5, 4 in consecutive months, then we're still having to print close to zeros to get that by the end. So I'll go average for the year is 4.
Oh, okay. So you're higher than me.
You got to think it through, Jay. If we're going to start, this next month is going to be probably 6.5 at least.
No. I think last month we were at 0.3. So what's that? That's 3.6. If it's 0.3 every month for the next 12, we're at 3.6.
So wait, how are you calculating this? You're calculating month to month, or are you calculating what the actual print is that they're like telling everyone?
No, I'm taking the 12-month moving average, basically.
Oh, well, that's different. That's different. If you're doing that, I'm there. 2.
Okay. I'm putting you down for 2. I'm at 3. I think both of us are being a little bit more aggressive than most of the rest of the world. So let's.
Oh yeah, everyone's saying 4 or 5.
Yep.
So
yep.
We'll write this off at the end of the year or make fun of each other, I guess.
Okay, what's next?
Next, well, let's since we've been talking about all this stuff, why don't we go to unemployment then? So how is all this going to affect unemployment? Because that seems to be synonymous with recession at this moment, that we can't have a recession until unemployment spikes significantly. So where do we think unemployment's going to land in 2023?
I like how you keep making me go first. Okay.
You're the expert.
No, I consider you the expert. Okay, I think this is going to be a typical recession. I don't think this is going to be a 2008 event. I also don't think it's going to be like just a fleeting thing that just we don't even notice it. I think it's going to be typical recession. And where do we end up in a typical recession? Somewhere in the 6% range, peak for unemployment. By the end of the year, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can make a prediction, but I'm going to say that we peak at 6.3%. That's the number I'm going to throw out there. And I think that's pretty typical for your average recession that we've seen over the past 50 or 60 or 70 years, which is where I think we're going to be. So, and when do we get there? I'm going to have us getting there probably towards the end of the year. So that could be pretty close to Q3, Q4 number towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I think you might. I'm going to go on the lower side again on that. I think labor participation rate still pretty low, and so I think that in the case of a recession, if it's not already here, if a recession does start to push through the economy, then we're going to see that labor participation rate start to tick up first, and then before we even see the over 4% unemployment. So I think once we get to that 4.5 unemployment, because we're still sub four now, once we get to that 4.5, then that's going to give the Fed the green light to ease off and start talking about, okay, we're done. And I think that alone is going to make people feel a little bit more at ease. And because unemployment, that's a real lagging effect too. And you have to take into consideration businesses. They they just went through COVID where they couldn't find anyone to hire. So they're going to be very, very slow to fire people. They took so long to try and get these people in. You're seeing it happen a little bit quicker in the tech industry, and I don't know if Elon Musk, with his kind of new methodology of just firing 60% of the workforce, and still Twitter's still there. So I don't know if that's gonna have any effect on the tech industry at all, but I think we're gonna get up in that 4.5 range. The Fed's gonna start changing what they're saying to everybody. It'll keep going for a little while, but I think it's gonna peak in the 5.5.
Okay. I think the labor participation rate, that's the number everybody kind of points to as yeah, we're not going to see a spike in unemployment anytime soon because nobody's looking for a job. But I think a lot of why we're seeing that really low labor participation rate is after COVID, a lot of people jumped into the gig economy. We got a lot of Uber drivers, a lot of Door Dashers, a lot of people that are kind of working for themselves, and so they don't really claim to be unemployed. They also don't claim to be looking for a job. But I have a feeling that if we start to see um, uh, some downward pressure on the economy, if we start to see GDP dropping and just people spending less, that the first line of people that are going to get hit are all these gig workers. And what are they going to do? I have a feeling they're going to start looking for jobs again. And I think we're going to all at once see a big spike in unemployment. I could be wrong. But I mean, I think everybody's been wrong on what's going on with unemployment for the last 2 years. But yeah, I don't think labor participation is going to be as big of an issue in the next year or two because I think a recession is going to kind of do a great big reset on all the unemployment data.
Yeah, that is a big problem that we have right now, and it's so difficult to predict jobs because there's so many different sources to pull from, and there's a huge argument across where, where we should we be getting these numbers, where should we be getting this data for what is the health of the job market. But yeah, that's it's an interesting perspective. Who knows? You might have to give up your Feet Finder account there, Jay, and get a real job.
I have a feeling we're going to look back in 10 years and everybody's going to realize that the way we measure unemployment just broke around 2020, 2021. And we're going to be measuring it completely differently a year or a decade from now. And we're going to be thinking about unemployment and unemployment numbers and data completely differently a decade from now. And I don't know if we're ever going to be able to compare previous performance and current or future performance for unemployment. I think there's just going to be this hard break somewhere in the early 20s. How we did things before and how we do things after.
Yeah. So do you think we're talking about all these different recessions, economies, and all these different things. How do you think this is going to affect the stock market? Is the next thing. I know a lot of people pay attention to the stock market. We're not big stock market people, uh, but a lot of people are. So how do you think this is going to affect people's 401ks and retirement plans?
Again, we're going to have a recession. And I think the market's been pretty resilient, but everything's been pretty resilient. And I think that's a factor of inflation. But if we agree that inflation's going to drop, if we agree that unemployment's going to increase and people are going to have less disposable income, if we agree well, we might not agree that the federal funds rate's going to stay high and interest numbers are going to stay high, but I think that's going to happen for at least the next 6 or 8 months. I think all signs point to the fact that the stock market's likely going to take a hit. I mean, we took a hit earlier in the year. Things have been relatively stable at about what is it, 5 to 10% below peak for the last few months. But I'm going to say we're going to take a little bit of a hit. And so, what's your preferred index here? Do you want to look at the Dow? You want to look at the
S&P.
S&P?
Let's do the S&P just because, yeah, it's a
Yep.
little bit easier.
So S&P right now, if I look it up, we're somewhere in the 38 range. I believe we got down to around 2,500 down during the big COVID crash back in 2020. So I could see somewhere in between. I'm going to cut those two in half. So we were 25 was the
Yeah,
COVID
the
crash.
recent low, if you just look back a year, the recent low was about 3,500.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to
Yeah.
cut that 35. Now I'm going to cut today's 38 in half with the COVID crash at 25, and let's say we're going to be about 600. What's that? That's 1,500, 1,300 points. I'm going to say 650 points lower. So I'm going to say we're at 3,150 on the last day of 2023 for the S&P.
Okay, so you have it going down pretty
Oh
significantly.
yeah, I think we're going to see it going down, simply because that's part of a recession.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. I guess it's one of those things where everyone's already predicted a recession is happening, right? So it's the same as if you look at the bond market, people are already pricing in future rate hikes and what's going to happen in the future. So people are already calling for a recession and they have been. And you could see that based off of the movement every time Jerome Powell opens his mouth. It's all just, okay, when is this recession going to happen and how long is it going to be and how long can the S&P run up until we have that recession? Um, so I don't think you're going to see that big of a drop off. It's one of those things where people are just waiting for Powell to say he's going to pivot, and then the stock market takes off. So the nature of the stock market these days is just people. There's no fundamentals anymore. It's just based off of feelings. So we've had kind of a ceiling here at 4,000 for a little while. People don't want to broach that, but I think as soon as we see some sort of pivot pending, there's nothing breaks before that. As soon as Powell says we're stopping or we're going to stop, then I think we see the stock market skyrocket above 4,000, four and a quarter. And then when we see a recession, it might come back down to 3,500 again, but I don't see it going much lower than that. So I think we're going to have a pretty level year around that 4,000 mark.
Okay, so your prediction is 4,000 at the end of the year?
Um, let's do four and a quarter. I'll do four and a quarter for the end of the year.
Four
I think
4250.
I think we'll be through the recession,
Wow.
or people will be looking optimistic by the end of that.
I hope you're right. Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't have any money in the market, so
It's easy
it
to
doesn't matter if I'm right or
it's
wrong.
easy
Yeah,
to
it's
play
easy.
with other people's money.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go a little random off here. What do you think gas prices are going to do? You think they're going to go up, or you think they're going to go down?
Okay, so it's funny. I don't normally notice gas prices. But gas
Are you
powered.
driving a Tesla?
I did. I had the Tesla for a while. I actually got rid of my Tesla, but so I'm buying gas again. But I'm not a big noticer of gas prices. It's one of those things I can't control, so I don't try. But my wife pointed out that Costco gas last week had dropped to like 293 a gallon or 283 a gallon, something like that. So I'm going to use that kind of as a baseline. I guess we're somewhere around let's call it $3 right now. I think there are a lot of non-economic factors that drive gas prices. Supply and demand is obviously a big one. So, do we think supply is going to where's demand going to go over the next year? I think with the war in Ukraine, I think with some of the struggles that Europe is seeing, we could see a slowdown in supply. I think we're going to increase the strategic reserves that we're producing here in the U.S., so that'll help. But I don't think there's going to be an appetite to kind of run through those again like we did last year. So let's say there's going to be some tightening supply, and at the same time, I think there's going to be some tightening demand. Anytime you see a recession, anytime you see unemployment go up, people aren't driving to work, people aren't taking as many vacations. I think demand's going to drop as well. Overall, I'm going to say demand's going to drop a little bit more than supply, and I know it's a lot more complicated than that. We can also look at the profit taking of the big oil companies, which has been huge over the last couple of quarters. So let's say they take lower profits. All in all, I think gas is going to be lower next year than what we're seeing this year, barring any major political or military event. So I'm going to go with we're at 3 now. I'm going to say gas is going to be at 275 at the end of next year. So a little bit lower than we are now, but not considerably so.
3, is that the average nationally right
I
now?
have no idea. Let me you start talking. I'll look it up.
Yeah, because it's a little higher in our area, but I tend to agree. I don't think we're going to see, once again, war in Ukraine. Who knows what's going on with that? That's a whole nother just topic discussion. Luckily, the U.S. has been sheltered out of as much as any other country can be from what's going on there because we have such a low dependence on Russia for oil. But then you touched on the strategic reserve. I don't know what the policy is. I don't know if that's an open thing to look up how much they can deplete the strategic reserve before they have to replenish it and at what level and all those different things. So that's a big wild card what they decide to do with that. But up until as long as inflation's a big issue, they're going to the government's going to try and keep those gas prices low. And to your point, I think right after inflation stops becoming an issue, then a recession is going to be the issue. So then demand goes down. So I agree with you that I think gas prices are going down next year.
So where it looks like as of today, we're calling it 313 on a national average.
Okay, it's good to know that my area is above the average. All right, let's get some more meaningful stuff.
I need a number. Not letting you go without a number.
Not going. All right, it's going to be 265.
Okay. You're locked in.
Okay. Yeah, lock it in. All right, let's go with some more meaningful stuff to our business then. Let's go with, let's start with residential. Residential mortgage rates. Where do you think they're going to go? We've talked a few times on earlier podcasts about mortgage rates. Where do you think they're going to end up next year?
So I had predicted 5% by the end of this year. I was off on that. I think directionally, I went against the grain, and everybody was saying rates were going to keep going up and keep going up. And I said November and December we were going to see rates drop, and I think I predicted between 5 and 5.5. I don't know where we are today. I'm guessing we're probably somewhere around 6, maybe a little over 6. So it's a point less than we were a couple months ago. I think with Fed funds rate continuing to go up, I think there's going to be obviously some pressure on mortgage rates as well. But at the same time, I think that volatility is dropping. And so when volatility drops, typically we have less upward pressure on rates. We have less upward pressure on bonds. And I think we're going to see bond prices level off and maybe start to drop into next year. So I think we'll probably see those two average out, the federal funds rate go up and volatility and bond prices go down. And I think we'll probably see mortgage rates lower next year than what we're seeing this year. I'm going to go with that same 5% that I thought for this year. I'm gonna have that number by the end of next year. I know you might say that Powell's going to start cutting before the end of next year, in which case we could go lower. But I think even if we don't see any cuts start before the end of next year, I still say mortgage rates are going to be lower than they are now. I think we're going to be between 5 and 6 for most of the year, and I'll go with 5% by the end of next year.
Yeah, so the national average actually right now is 6.5. I don't know if
Oh,
that
okay.
changes your thinking, but yeah, I'm going to go lower on that one. So the we discussed this in a previous podcast that the only way that really we're going to see interest rates, mortgage rates go up is if the Fed hikes above that 5.25. The market's kind of priced in that they're going to stop at 5.25 and they're going to hang on for a little bit and then they're going to start cutting. And I don't see us getting above 5.25. If my prediction is anywhere correct, that we're just seeing the effects of the first hikes coming into play now. He started, he meaning Powell, started getting more aggressive with that rate hikes pretty quickly. So um, I don't see us getting above 5.25. And if we do pivot, then it's going to be a hard pivot, in my opinion. So I see them dropping down. So I see by the end of the year, I think we're going to be between 4 and 5. So let's call it 4.5.
Yeah, so we're both in the same ballpark there, and I think we're both a good bit lower than what a lot of people seem to think, but I don't think it's unreasonable. Even if we don't see rate cuts start before the end of next year, I don't think that 4.5 to 5 is unreasonable.
Yeah, and that's for residential mortgage rates because most people
Sure.
pay attention to that. Commercial rates will, I mean, if you want to talk about fixed rates, they'll mimic that a little bit. Um, if as far as adjustable rates, as they say, we usually call them floating rates. They'll obviously mimic the Fed funds rate a little bit more, but it'll be the same kind of idea. So people like to talk about the relationship between mortgage rates and cap rates. So where do you think cap rates are going to end up next year?